any changes compared to last year. You'll see we do record these. If people aren't able to come, we try to forward the email out to people. So you'll get a note about recording. And you'll have a chance after we talk about the reports in general, you'll have a chance to ask some questions generally, and then you can go into a breakout room and just talk about your one-to-one report, like what your results were for your agency or your program. So, for those of you who don't know me, I think I know you all of you, but I'm Dr. Ann Hobbs. I'm the director of the Juvenile Justice Institute for about 30 more days. But this is our juvenile justice or our evidence-based Nebraska evaluation team that you see right here. And I will pass it to Sadie to introduce, and then you can pass to someone else, please.
Perfect. Hi, I'm Sadie Brewer, and I am a PhD student working with the JJI, and I help with data analyses and just getting the reports ready. I'll hand it over to Michelle.
Hey everyone, Michelle Luders. I'm the program specialist here with the Juvenile Justice Institute on the Evidence-Based Nebraska project. I try to help with kind of the formatting and data entry and those types of things as it relates to this project. And Bennett, I'll let you introduce yourself quick.
Hello, I'm Bennett. I'm an intern here at the JJI, and I kind of help out all around, but I'll be taking some notes today, and I'll pass it to Faith.
Hello, I am Faith Hall. I'm a master's student that works with JJI, and I just help create the reports.
So I think we'll go ahead and jump in. In the interest of time, I'll walk through some of the, did it forward, Michelle? Did it go to the next screen? Sweet. I'll walk through some of this, but we should have plenty of time because this is a smaller group to have some more in-depth conversations, like I said, either as a group or when we go into smaller breakout rooms. Um, so you'll notice the reports that you got. First of all, you should have all received a report. They're a little bit different from last year. Part of the reason the timeframes are similar, so it's July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. There may be points of time that your agency was not funded, and so you'll see that in the fiscal year graphs where if you see no youth served, it might be that some programs weren't funded the full 3 years. But one of the things that's a little different about this year's reports compared to last year is that we're doing a little bit more trend analysis and we're using more statistical analysis. Last year we did just a lot of descriptives. And the benefit of doing that is really that you can see is there statistical differences in outcomes? So we'll get to those outcomes in just a minute, but we try whenever we do that to make it pretty accessible, right? We want anything that we produce for you to be meaningful, but then also to create kind of this community of practice. Like the other people on this call are all school-based programs. Some of them are interventionists and some of them are alternatives, but you all have very similar outcomes that we're measuring. So when you see the assessment or the matrix that we use at the end, they're very similar for your program types. The whole goal behind doing this kind of work is really to be helpful. And so if you find something that either doesn't make sense or you're like, that's not helpful, we want you to tell us. You'll have a chance to either, you can verbally tell us or you can take a survey at the end. Because doing program evaluation should really give you steps for how to improve your program. That's the intent of the legislation behind this work. Like this Nebraska statute outlines that community-based aid funded programs should demonstrate effectiveness. But also it's just good practice, right? Like we can all find opportunities to improve. So the report should really be useful and not just to you, but like if you work with a staff or a board or a county attorney, like being able to share your report, it is your report. And so if you want to share those results, you absolutely can. Some counties have used them to write grants. So it's really a program evaluation that's designed for you. If your results are less than what you hope for and you want to, change those outcomes, certainly reach out to us if you find that our recommendations aren't specific enough, or ask it when we meet one-on-one today. But you can share those as well, right? Like it's really just about making improvements. So in order to make this kind of assessment, we do need data. This year overall, we had better, more improved data. So you need both, like the answers we're trying to, or the questions we're trying to answer for school-based programs are, is your program effective at engaging youth? Are you effective at improving grades, and increasing attendance? And so those are the first three that are circle or centered on school-based outcomes. And then the final two are included in all reports across Nebraska. And that's because it's a legislative requirement that community-based aid programs are effective at keeping kids from getting deeper into the juvenile system. So I'll talk about that more in depth in just a minute. But to answer these kind of questions, you need enough cases. So sometimes if we have less than 10 cases, like in really small rural areas, it's really hard to make a definitive statement if you have 3 cases. Like we will say something or write something up, but it's just not very reliable when it's only 3 cases. The other thing that we need to have is with those cases, even if you have 100 cases, you need sufficient data. So we need those pre and post measures on grades, engagement with school, those kind of things. Otherwise, we just are not able to make reliable answers to those questions. As I mentioned, there are some measures that are uniform. It doesn't matter if a program is an alternative to detention or school alternative or a mentoring program. One of the goals outlined in statute in Nebraska is that programs will reduce recidivism. We don't call it recidivism at JGI because some of the kids have not yet been involved in the system, so they're not technically reoffending. It's maybe their first offense. So we measure, we call it future system involvement, and we measure it 4 different ways. First of all, does the youth have a status offense? Or do they have a law violation? So a status offense would be like missing school or running away, those kind of things. Law violation would be like an MIP or theft, assault, those kind of things. Both of those are measured within 1 year of completing your program. So we look at the discharge date and then we see, does anything happen within that time frame? We do delay. We try to look at a discharge date and then take it about 30 days after. And the reason for that is sometimes kids are kicked out for a specific law violation, and we try not to count that. That's not technically recidivism. It's usually the reason the case closed unsuccessfully. That's less likely in school-based programs, but it does happen. So we try to account for that. Like Michaela, when she was here, would look through all of the closure reasons and tried to weed those out. So both status and law violations are looked at within 1 year of the discharge, and then probation and detention we examine that at any point moving forward. So it could be a kid who was it could be 4 years after the program. If you had a case in 2021, that could be the case. So it's just a broader look at recidivism and where your kids end up. And it also kind of allows you to look at maybe we're serving really high risk youth. So if you see a lot of your population are ending up in detention, that's usually an indicator of a higher risk population. So that's just a quick overview. Now I want to go through, I'm going to show you a report. These screens that you're looking at, they're not related to one specific county. We try to de-identify. And we do that just because, we don't release this data or these reports without your permission. So this county, that's why it says County X, right? In this county, what we're comparing or looking at is the county population. So in this side, on this left side, I guess my left side, in this county, 5% of the juvenile population is Black. This program happens to be serving 27% of the youth they serve during this time frame were Black. So you can see it's overrepresentative of Black youth, and there's fewer white youth being served in this program. Now, this might be because if it's an alternative school, it might be that this maps more closely to chronic absenteeism or school problems than it does to the county population. So whenever you look at data, there's usually an explanation behind it, but without digging into a very in-depth evaluation for each specific program, we don't know the why, but we do know that this is happening. So, like I said, the Black population is more Black youth are served by this program. Hispanic is less represented. All other races are represented more in the program population. And then we have a small percent of 1.5%. If you see a dotted line, that means you have some missing data. It just wasn't captured in JCMS. The other thing that we look at, and you can see this blank space, it's not a mistake. We just whited out the county name. We look at like how the patterns of how youth enroll, how likely they are to enroll, and then what fiscal years are more youth, which youth came in during which fiscal years. So you can see like in this first 20 to 21, the program was serving more youth. This gap in an ideal world, the blue mountain should line up with this space. And because what this represents, the blue is where youth enrolled and the other is referrals. So you can see in 2022, 2023, there's a little bit more alignment between who's referred and who enrolls. In a perfect world, you want to see those really closely aligned. It means you're targeting the right population and your referral agency knows that they're sending you the right cases. Then we also just write out some of the discharge reasons, and this is so you can see, where do most of your cases land. So in this particular example of 183 cases, a large percent, 113 cases closed successfully. They completed all program requirements. A smaller percent were non-compliant. 30 kids transferred to other schools, and then 12 moved away. And only 3 didn't participate, or the youth or the parent refused. And so that's really what we want to see. Like if you have a lot of parents refusing a program, it's important to look at why. But some of these things are absolutely outside of the program's control, right? Like you can't control if a youth is transferring to another school. Now, the non-compliance you might see, if you have a high number of youth who are non-compliant, you might see as a recommendation of exploring ways to help youth be more compliant. That usually means incentives, right? So, like all of us, like kids will respond to incentives sometimes better than just telling them what to do. So, this chart, again, it just is meant to show you whether there are certain racial or ethnic groups that are coming through at different times. And so you can see here overall for all youth right after July, so August makes sense for a school-based program. We saw a spike in referrals to the program. And these were predominantly white youth. So if you follow the line across, you can see, but overall, all youth had a spike. And then again, in probably late January, beginning of February. Makes sense. It looks like it's a semester-based program, or the referrals are coming through at a semester. This chart is meant to have you focus in on which youth are successful and which youth are closing as other. When you see these dotted boxes, it means something's missing. And so we didn't have closure or discharge reasons for, it's only 1 case out of 4, but it's 25% of this population. So when you're looking at these percents, one thing to always do is go back and look at this column because, wow, 25% missing data looks, wild, but it's 1 youth when you look at the 4 over here. So always, or this 100%, right? 100% of the cases were still open or unknown closure reason. Well, it's really, that was 1 case. So make sure you're checking these hard numbers over here against these percentages. What we do know, I would focus on the top line to start is of the 92 youth who went through this program, 36% closed successfully. This is pretty low, but it could be that because 35% still seem to be open. After the amount of time that's gone by, that's pretty high, but sometimes we see that in school-based programs, right? The program just keeps the case open so they don't have to re-enter all that data. So as long as you look at the data and know the why, then you can do something with that moving forward, like incentivize it, or if it's a data entry thing, work with our students to help come out and clean up data, or change something in the programming. On the outcomes page, some of you may have gotten a report that has a number here, and we can help you interpret that. Later on, I started to put in the grade because you can see it correlates, or it aligns with the grade. So I'll start with this one. What we know in this example is that youth came in at intake with a D average and they left with a D average. Sometimes programs are like, well, Anne, I'm a short-term program, right? Kids are here for a week. I'm not going to change grades. That might be. That's why we have other measures here. So don't sweat it if that's the case, but just know like we see like mathematically we can see cases that go from like a D to a C minus. So even if it's small movement, we're aiming for some movement. Um, Changes in missed school, the same thing. Like we're looking for improvement. So this youth went from it was in between, or this on average, this program went from kids were frequently to sometimes missing, and it was a little closer to sometimes. So slight improvement, probably not statistically significant. Only it says statistically significant improvements in school attachment, but not in these two. So I was going to say, these don't look like statistical differences. They're not. On this side, you can see it. Now, I will warn you, this is counterintuitive and I'll own it. I'm like, oh, this one really, when things go down, it makes you think it's worse, but this is actually an improvement and a statistically significant improvement. This program moved from low attachment, a 3, to medium attachment. So that's a positive. In our layout graphics people, we should have switched that because intuitively it might look like it's not a desirable outcome, but it really is. So in the future, we will change that. But so in this program, this was statistically significant, but these were not. So we try to narrate that up top just because I own that sometimes these are not intuitive, right? Sometimes they don't totally, like I think the D chart makes sense, but the other ones, when you're switching, when you're changing from numbers to concepts, it's sometimes difficult to do. So. And then the last section of your report should have a combination. And like I said, this is right from statute. It's a requirement from statute. And what we're looking at is overall, how many youth had some kind of future system involvement. So in this program example, 14% of the 200 youth served had future system involvement. So that's just an overall, kind of gives you an indicator of maybe what risk level you're serving youth. Now down here, when you look at these numbers, these can be duplications. So I'll just give you an example is this one youth that had a status violation may also have a law violation, may also have a probation intake, and may also have been in detention. So don't count these as individual youth. These are events because kids can commit more than one law violation and they can hit different system points. This line up here, though, is youth, and that's why we've written it that way. It's literally 28 of the 200 youth served had some kind of contact with the system. Then we go on to break it down between successful and unsuccessful because, and this probably is intuitive, like when kids are served by a program, even if it's not like a miracle worker, we do hope that the kids that successfully complete that program have lower rates of recidivism and that it takes them longer to, if they are going to have a future system involvement. And that's what we see here is we do see that 24 of the 184 successful youth, which is 13%, had future system involvement compared to 43%. Now, again, these are small numbers. So this program had a lot of successful cases and not very many unsuccessful. So those percentages are probably a little skewed, but it's still the pattern that we're looking for. So I would feel more comfortable like if they both had sets of 25. But, you know, I'm happy that these kids were not unsuccessful in this program. So this is just how data works. And then this last box, this is called the survival curve. And it was something when we sat down with the Crime Commission, they wanted to see this. I think it's a little hard to read sometimes, so we narrate it. What we're looking for is how many days does it take for a youth to have that first law contact. I'll say, like having been a diversion practitioner, I've had kids walk out of my office and commit a law violation that same day. It's pretty disheartening. But this program had pretty good outcomes. Kids, they're close though. Successful and unsuccessful are really close in time. Because successful youth took 226 days, so almost a whole year before they had a subsequent charge, even the status. That's pretty good outcome. And then unsuccessful youth took 231. So there's not a big difference between successful and unsuccessful like we see up here, but still it's longer. So how this feeds into the scoring or the evaluation matrix. At the beginning of the year, we used something similar last year, but it didn't have weighted outcomes. So what we're looking at, you do have some basic process variables like how many youth are referred and how many are enrolled, but you're not scored on that or like racial groups. That's really just for your information if you wanted to target a specific group and work more closely with them. Like let's say you we're serving a lot of ninth graders. You might want to design your programming for ninth graders. But you're not scored on that in the matrix. In the matrix, it really comes down to youth that are discharged from the program, how many and what percent report higher school attachment, and is it statistically significant? How many increase attendance? Is it statistically significant? How many improve their grades? Like even slightly, if it's statistically significant, and we see that pattern across the whole group, then that's counted.
Crackers would be needed.
I think somebody might need to mute.
Thank you.
And then the last two are back to those future system involvement. We're looking at overall, is it a high percent of youth that have subsequent law violations? And then what's the comparison between successful and unsuccessful? And so when we look at this on a chart or on the matrix, you can see the points that were assigned for this. When something's grayed out like this, what it means is we really didn't have enough cases to do a good comparison. So if you have 0 cases that are successful or 0 cases that are unsuccessful, you don't have a good comparison group. So if you see something grayed out, it doesn't count against you or doesn't count for you. It's just taken out of the matrix. So for example, this program type has a total of 20 points available, but in this program example, they would only be it would only be 15 because it's these 3, right? These 3 that are in green, and then this bottom one. That doesn't add up, right? It'd only be 10, 15, 17.5 is what they would that's what they would be held accountable for. All right, so I've been rambling on. I just have a couple more things and then we'll open it up for just generally questions. So you can see, like, even if you get fairly few points, you can still end up in the promising range. And you might think that's not intuitive, but the reason is that we do see programs that have negative numbers. So if you're serving a youth and the grades go down or their school attachment goes down, it might be that you're serving a really tough population. But if you see that across all 3 outcomes, that really is, you can get a negative score. And so that's why even low positive is still promising, right? It means something good's happening in that program. And especially school-based program, it's really hard. Like the whole reason kids are in a school-based program is because they're not attending, they're not engaged, and they have low grades, right? Or they have behaviors that are getting them kicked out. So to take that into account, really, any kind of progress is viewed as positive. To get in this high end or high end of promising up to effective, you do need to show some statistical significance. I'll go back. You can see there's higher points when things are statistically different. And the reason for that is just mathematically, that doesn't happen by chance. It means something about either that program or the youth you served over these 3 years was unique and caused that outcome. So that statistical significance really does make a difference. Okay. The last thing, I think it's the last thing, we try to narrate all of the stuff I just said. Because we did a little bit more statistical analysis this year, I hope it's not hard to read. Like we want to put in, we kind of went back and forth on this early on. If we put in a formula, then you could show it to your professor friend and they could verify it. Like, so that's kind of good science or evidence-based practices, but it's also not very readable. Like even for professors, it's not very readable. So we tried to make it super readable and then make some concrete recommendations at the end. I think also at the end of your reports, I put in some references in some of the reports. So if I'm like, here are the researchers that say school attachment helps kids improve their grades. That's not just a JJI statement. Like there's evidence-based research behind the things that we're measuring and the matrix that we use. And then we're trying to get some of that posted up to our website. I think School-Based might be close to complete, but last thing, and then I'll open it up, is we do have 2 more sets of this. So if you run a diversion program, we will be meeting in person at the Community-Based Aid Conference. Michelle, I think it's June 12th, though. The 13th, I think, is a Friday, so I think
Oh,
it's the
shoot.
12th.
The 12th, yeah.
Sorry, I just noticed it just now. And then prevention promotion, we'll be doing a webinar like this one. So if you run a prevention program, we'll be talking to you on another webinar. But as always, you can set up a time to meet with us also. So I'm going to pause for a minute and breathe and open it up. Like, are there any parts of the report that you want to chat about or that you find confusing or you have questions about. And if you'd rather just do this in a one-on-one room, you can put your name in the chat or your agency in the chat and we'll break out. But if it's a general question, it might be helpful for everyone to hear. If not, so sometimes some of the things that people say are, I mentioned it already, like an alternative school, it's hard to change grades. Um, we see minor movement there. That's why last year we didn't use a statistical analysis. This year we did because sometimes you can see that in the math behind it. But there's also other measures you can aim for. Um, if you if you're like me and you don't go into a breakout room and then have questions, like wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh, I should have asked that. Just reach out. You can send it to UNO, JGI, or Michelle, or one of us, and let us know. The other thing is if you're waiting and you do want to go and do a one-on-one meeting, if you are in the waiting room waiting for that to happen, there's a survey that Faith or Michelle, somebody will put in the chat box, and you can maybe take a minute and let us know. Feel free to be super transparent, honest, like direct, because the goal of these really is for you to have concrete information and for it to be helpful. Like that's the ultimate goal of program evaluation. And so, if they're not readable or if you think there's a mistake or something, that's information you should definitely tell us. Because we're dealing with huge data sets and lots of different programs, like we're humans, we can make mistakes. Or if something's not understandable, it could just be we had an off day. So please do take the time to do the survey. You got questions? Was anybody surprised by their results, or did you think, no?
Come off mute. I would say one of the things for us was we don't track any of the law violations or anything. We're just doing what we're doing with the young people. And so it was refreshing to see for us the kind of some of that future system involvement piece. We have personal relationships with each one of the young people. And so we know a lot of it, but then to see that number it just helped to give a shot in the arm to keep going, if I will say it that
Yes.
way. And so I think that maybe that's the piece of this that isn't really quantifiable is that it gives validation to what often feels like very hard, unappreciated
Yes.
work. And
Yes.
so it was something exciting to be able to share back with those program staff to be like, look, what you're doing is making a difference. It's working. So I appreciated being able to have that and use it as that kind of boost to get through the rest of the school year. So it was really good timing for us.
Oh, good. I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah. Or bring it to a funder, right? Like,
We're actually
definitely
presenting
use
it to our board of directors because we've been talking about, how do we look at program effectiveness? So this was perfect timing. I do have one maybe less data specific, but more broad. One of the questions and one of the pieces is around that school attachment. And
Yes.
I find that oftentimes that's a very subjective thing in terms of, it's what the assessment is of that moment. And sometimes that is dealt with because of whatever's happening. So are there
Yes.
tools that people are using that help make that be less subjective?
Yes, I'm so excited you asked me this question. So yes, there's almost always a tool that you can use. I'm happy to send you a survey link. As a researcher, we're always walking that line between like, here, take 10 surveys and just subjectively measuring things. But yes, there are school attachment and engagement surveys that I could send you. So I will do that.
Please
Like you said,
do.
take it. take it for a grain. I'll look for the shortest one, but then it's not so subjective. But I would also not discount like your staff or yourself. Like if you've been doing the work for a while, you probably have a good gauge, or if you ask the youth, like people are pretty reliable on how they feel about their experience. It's surprising sometimes. Like unless somebody's trying to be deceptive, kids are
Yeah.
surprisingly
I
honest.
I guess one of the things I think about is when, like with the time that we're capturing, and maybe a young person's perception of their school engagement. If they've had a negative interaction, they've had a test that they've failed, if they've had something that's happened, that's really influencing what they're saying. And so, like looking at, is there some kind of a tool that would take a young person's perspective and the staff that's working with them and mold it together to come up with the best score possible? That would help us make it a little bit more.
Yes. So, and this is a little off track, but it's the one we recommend for attendance programs. So I'll just put it out there. It's called the School Refusal Assessment Instrument, and it's by Christopher Kearney.
Yeah,
It's
I
not
know that
super
one.
long. Yeah, I was going to say, but it measures the parent's perspective and the youth. You could use something like that, but for school engagement, I'll have to look and see if there's that, like if there's those two comparative. Because you're right, the more perspective you get, the more accurate you get, right? So a parent might be thinking one thing, and a school might be thinking one thing, and the kid's like, "Ma, I'm not thinking anything." So I'll see if there's something out there. Or Sadie or Faith, if one of you wants to do some digging. I do have an example of a school assessment tool. I just don't think it has anybody else's perspective. Now they could certainly take that same tool and then compare it. And then Rose, we need to write a paper about this because this is exciting, right? And all the programs, like as a cohort, if you want to do those kind of things and take it to the next level, um, if any of you, I don't know if any of you run prevention and promotion programs, but that's exactly, they do a whole survey pre and post of how youth are changing using validated tools that we co-developed with Boys Town. So you can definitely go to the next level. It's just sometimes researchers are told like, don't do so many surveys. So yeah,
Perfect. Well,
but I'll
I
send,
would appreciate those tools. So thank you so much.
yeah,
Okay, so Dr.
absolutely.
Hobbs, we do have a question in the chat from Carrie. Carrie, I don't
Mhm.
know if you want to unmute and ask your question or if you want me to read it.
Dr. Hobbs and I've talked about this before, just about how it's hard to show like the success of the work completion and the change in grades when some of the youth are sent to us with grades that are so horrible. We're just working on that missing list, and there is so much progress made, but to raise that grade in the 4-point scale, sometimes there's no place to show that growth. So that's just a comment. She and I've talked about that in the past, and just still working on a way that we can show that progress better in the tutoring program. My other question is in the discharge reasons, are there, in the other comments or other commitments that they left, is that considered a negative or a not successful outcome?
Yeah, we get questions about that other category. It's generally not, it's not grouped in with successful because sometimes the kid just moved away, right? And so we can't count it as success. If they graduate, we count it as successful. But if it's other or transferred schools, I get it. It's not always negative. Sometimes that's a good thing for the kid. But as a
Uh-huh.
state, we do group those in with unsuccessful.
Do I
So
need to ask questions more about what the other commitments are and where my suggestions would be to where I should put them in so that we
yeah,
can
so
show more successful rate?
well, yeah. So if you know, let's say, for example, and I think I wrote this in your narrative, but if you're closing a case because a kid just got a 20-hour-a-week job and he's super jazzed about it and it lines up with all of his strengths, and right, that's a successful closure. That kid's moving
Right.
on to something great. If a kid
Okay.
is dropping out, I mean, we got this question this morning on truancy. If you're closing a case because a family decides to transfer to homeschool, and we know there are some cases where there's actually no curriculum happening at home, then you
Right.
know as a program that's probably not a successful closure. So to some degree, marking things as successful or not is somewhat subjective. Like I talk about this with truancy or diversion programs all the time. What if a kid does 95%, not 100% of the requirements? it's probably successful, right?
Right.
So internally, we need to come up with like, what's that? When do we know a case is successfully closed? Because
Okay.
all we see is data. But if you think a case is successfully closed, like you've been doing this work a long time,
Right.
we trust
Right.
you. Like you'll
Right.
know.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I was a little surprised when I just thought it might be a little bit more successful than the numbers that
Yeah.
I guess there wasn't a specific spot. I guess I was a little surprised. But again, I still think the program has a purpose and it serves a purpose, and the kids we do work with, do make progress because they attend. That's the progress
Yes.
right there. So
I
okay,
was going to say, don't discount that for truancy and school-based programs. The enrollment and the success rates are all very, very low. Like
right.
if without embarrassing people, if I had everybody put their percents in, I notice it hands down compared to all other programs. Even alternatives to detention, like really deep end kids. There's something about, I mean, it's just you're hitting at the reason kids aren't in school and aren't engaging, right? They're not going to engage with me just because I'm a program versus school. So
Right.
yeah, yeah, I wouldn't be. It's great
Yeah.
if you're hitting even a 50% success rate. And
Okay.
that's not what I would say to a diversion program. Diversion should be closer to 75.
So then I have another program with the kids that are out of school suspended and come to our center, during the day. So that one was called a school-based intervention, and we got a negative on -5 on that high, future system involvement. So which is kind of why we have those kids in the first place.
I was gonna say I felt unfair about that, just so you know.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's high risk kids. You're serving high risk kids.
Yes.
Yes.
And the reason that they've gotten an expulsion or a 19-day suspension is because they had those, illegal substances at school, or, continual, behavior and assaultive behavior. So that I didn't quite think was so fair, since they were so high risk kids that we have, but
yes. Yes,
it
yes,
still
yes.
says our program,
Really
is working. Okay, that's all I have for now.
Was that the Madison Alternative School program?
It was yes, it's for let me go back here. Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, I just wanted to double check because I was like, I remember your reports because I write the narrative. So I'm like,
Yes.
I remember thinking, but your program involvement, your hours were in the 80%. That is
Yes.
absolutely great. So like, it's not like kids aren't coming to the program. You're doing really good for kids that are expelled.
Yes.
So yeah.
I would say so too. It's just that, again, you've got a mark there for it, that says the future system involvement, when those kids are already sometimes
Yes.
ticketed when they first come to us. Now, it's really good that we have that program too, because then those kids that were first citation, then we get to show on diversion what they can really do on a program, such as, hey, we start them on diversion after their 20-day suspension, but look what they've done while they were at our building and during that suspension.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I don't know if
go
this is
hand in
any.
hand.
Yeah, I don't know if it's any consolation, but your data definitely tracks with what you're saying. Like you have a really high percent of law violators coming in, and your successful cases at least are lower than your unsuccessful cases. So you're just dealing
Right.
with tough kids, and the data definitely shows that. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. And one last thing I'll say,
Yep.
Carrie, is your successful kids make it almost a full year before violating the law again, compared to your unsuccessful cases, which make it only like 3 months. So,
Right.
so there's lots of good
Right.
things going on.
Yes. Yes. And it's all, I think, all because of our grant funding, that we have all that wraparound with all of our programs, tutoring, diversion, the after school program, the truancy program, all those things work hand in hand, because we've got the capability through our grant funding to keep an eye on these kids and work with them in a wraparound way.
Yeah. Yeah. It shows. I mean, you're having good outcomes. It's just you got tough kids.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. If nobody has questions, you're free to please take the survey